Hey, so I don't know if you watched the last video, but it ended with a phone call. That was my potential new employer calling me. So it went really well. We talked for about a half hour, so fucking A, awesome. I'm in a much better mood than I was 30 minutes ago. Much more energetic. So I'm recording this right after I just recorded the asinine video. So yeah, hopefully I have a new job. We'll find out about that soon. So this episode, as you saw by the title, is called Silent Bob Speaks. Name of the book he wrote, his first book. I believe that's also the name of his blog, silentbobspeaks.com. Could be wrong about that. It's been a long time since he updated the blog. But this is a fucking very cool book, very fun to read if you're a fan of Kevin Smith. Obviously, he's a fantastic writer. If you follow him on Twitter or if you've read any of his blogs, you know that reading something he writes, you can hear his voice in your head and it just moves really well, and he's a natural storyteller in pretty much any medium. So after finishing up the phase one of Kevin Smith, the View Askew movies, you know, Clerks through Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and before getting into phase two, you know, the Jersey Girl of it all, I wanted to talk about this, which is a bit of a bridge between the two. This book, Silent Bob Speaks, is a collection of essays and stories, non-fiction stories, that he wrote for a couple of different magazines and websites. Let me see. Arena Magazine, Details, New Jersey Monthly, and Film Comment. That's where these originally appeared. It's a fairly long book, but it moves very, very quickly because there's a lot of different subject matters, a lot of different subjects being discussed, and it's very funny and sometimes very insightful and a couple times very sad. So let me see. Let me look at the introduction, table of contents. So it goes in this middle section of like in between Jay and Silent Bob and Jersey Girl, because the book opens up with a bunch of diaries about Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, the pre-production and the casting on Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, going on how they auditioned people, how they met Charlie Sheen, that kind of good stuff. And the book ends, I believe it ends, yeah, the book ends with a bit on Jersey Girl, the production, the pre-production, and the post-production. The pre-production, the production, and the post-production on Jersey Girl. So this is a cool little bit of a bridge between the two, the two sections of Kevin Smith's world. Now he's in phase 3 with Tusk and shit. I'm so excited for phase 3. So there's a bunch of pre-production diaries and production diaries where he gives details on the movies being made, on going on auditions, lots of behind-the-scenes stuff. But there's also a bunch of stuff about whatever he feels like talking about or felt like talking about when he got these gigs to write for the magazines. So, you know, he talks about comic books, he talks about Britney Spears, there's a whole thing on Britney Spears. He talks about Spider-Man, he talks about being fat, there's a whole couple of essays on morbid obesity that are really heartbreaking and personal, but also very funny. He interviews Ben Affleck, he interviews Tom Cruise, talks about Mulholland Drive, all over the map. It's reading this book is like listening to a Kevin Smith podcast, because it starts out with one thing and then just fucking goes all over the map to anything he's interested in the moment. Excellent read. I got this at a bookstore for full price back in the day, so it says $13.95 is what I paid for it. I'm sure you can find this on the internet for like 50 cents at this point. Books nobody gives a shit about anymore. Physical media, who gives a shit? Which means you probably also download it or get an audiobook version of it. His second book, maybe it was his third book. The other book, Tough Shit, Life Advice from a Fat Lazy Slob Who Did Good. That book does exist as an audiobook, and you can get a audio version of it where he reads it to you, which is pretty funny. I'll get to that later, though. That's a bit later from now. So if you haven't ever read any of Kevin Smith's stuff, check out his blog. You know he's a good writer, obviously. If you're watching this, you're probably a fan. Check out his blog, and if you like his stuff, get his book. His first book, Silent Bob Speaks. They're really fun stories. There's a lot of cool behind-the-scenes details about Jay and Silent Bob and Jersey Girl that aren't in the commentary track or on the DVD. Just very cool little exclusive things. It's a very easy, fun read. Perfect to go take a shit and read something book. Perfect I'm on the bus kind of book. It's an excellent thing to just kind of enjoy life a little bit while you're waiting to do something else. It's a fantastic read. It's got a bunch of cool quotes in the back from people you love, like George Carlin and Ben Affleck. The Rolling Stones like it. The critics loved this book. The critics like his books way more than his movies, weirdly enough. And I'm not sure if this one doesn't say anywhere on this copy. I don't know if this one became a bestseller, but I believe his other two books did become New York Times bestsellers, which is pretty fucking impressive in its own right. So that's that for this episode. My favorite story in here? That's tough. They're all over the place. I love, obviously, anything involving Scott Mosier. He talks a bit about Scott Mosier. I love him talking about him and Walt going around on road trips down to flea markets and comic book stores looking for comic books. But I think my favorite story in here might be Lap Dance, which is a story he tells about going to, spending some time in strip clubs and how I can't really explain why it's so compelling, but it's not the kind of shit, like, it's funny, sexy, body stuff that you hear Kevin Smith talk about a lot, but it's a much more serious take on it, even though it's still funny. Anyway, check it out. It's a good read. You probably find a bunch of these articles just on the internet already. You don't probably have to buy the book. You probably just look for, Kevin Smith lap dance. Be careful if you Google that. You might see an interesting video or two. Not from Kevin Smith, mind you. I mean from weird, crazy fans of his. I don't like those fans of Kevin Smith on the internet. They're weird. Anyway, so that's this episode. Silent Bob. Silent Bob Speaks, fantastic book full of essays. I've read it a bunch of times. As you can tell, it's very, worn. The pages are very, well thumbed. The Dear Kevin for this week is a new topic. I haven't talked about this one before, I don't think. Maybe in a roundabout way. So, Dear Kevin, I love your books, I love your movies, and in particular, when you talk about your books, you always say, I'm not really an author, I just kind of accidentally wrote a book. You say that this book, Silent Bob Speaks, was just an accidental book. You wrote some articles for some people, and then they collected them. That doesn't count as a book. You say My Boring Ass Life doesn't count as a book. That's just a blog. I just wrote that over the course of a year or so, and they collected it into a book. That doesn't count as a book. I'm not really a writer. And I'm sure you said something similar about Tough Shit, which is, yeah, whatever. I talked about myself. That doesn't count as a book. You're always knocking yourself down. On the fucking Batman v Superman review you just put up on YouTube. Go find it, kids. It's a really fun review. It's like an hour-long review. In that review, you say, I'm not a filmmaker, so I shouldn't judge. I'm a shitty filmmaker, so I shouldn't judge. You've been doing this for as long as I've been watching your stuff. On various commentary tracks going as far back as Mallrats and Clerks, and all of the Evening with Kevin Smith. I saw you live once, twice, and you you did it in both instances. You said, I'm a shitty filmmaker. I'm not good at this. Stop doing that. For a couple of reasons. I understand, first of all, why you're doing it. You talk about it a lot in various places, and I do the same thing. When you grow up fat, you have to have a fucking sense of humor, and you have to make fun of yourself before everybody else will. Because if you say it, it's funny. If they say it, it fucking hurts. I totally get that. Makes you have a personality when you're young. You have to form, you have to be charming, able to deflect shit by being able to make fun of yourself. I get that. But stop doing it because, A, you're not. It's just frustrating to hear you say you're a bad filmmaker. I'm a fan of yours, so of course it's frustrating for me to hear you say I'm a bad filmmaker. Plus, you've been doing this for 20-some years. You've got best-selling books. You've worked with some fantastic actors. You've made 13, 12 movies. You've done some amazing things with your life. So for you to say I'm not really a filmmaker is just people are just going to start agreeing with you. And I know you don't like being the target on the internet or anywhere else. People pick on you a lot because you put yourself out there, and that's wonderful. I try to do the same thing. Look, I'm on the internet talking about stuff. But I think people will stop fucking, making fun of you or make fun of you less if you fucking stop saying you're a shitty filmmaker, because you're not. I know you're not. Your real fans know you're not a shitty filmmaker or a shitty writer. We all know you're awesome. So reason number one to stop doing that is maybe the fucking internet will stop fucking making fun of you so much if you stop saying it. You're opening the door. Hey, make fun of me, right? Stop doing that. You're a grown man, you're a talented filmmaker, stop baiting the trolls. Second reason's more personal. It hurts my feelings when you say you're a bad filmmaker because you're my hero. You're the reason why I want to make movies. You're the reason why, I'm a writer. And I love all of your work. Except for maybe Cop Out. I like Cop Out. We'll get to Cop Out eventually. I love your work a lot, so when you say I'm a bad filmmaker, it's just well, that means all your fans are clearly idiots because only idiots would like a bad filmmaker, or only people with bad tastes would like a bad filmmaker. And it means I'm a bad filmmaker because only a bad filmmaker would be inspired by a bad filmmaker. Granted, I know you don't intend any of that, but when I hear you say it over and over again over the course of the decade or so I've been a fan of you, it's really frustrating to hear you say I'm a shitty filmmaker, because no, you're not. If you were a shitty filmmaker, I wouldn't like you, and you wouldn't have such legions of fans. And when you say you're a shitty filmmaker, I know you're just playing fun, you're taking away the haters, and you're trying to get there first. But it is this weird indirect insult to your fans. At least that's how it feels to me sometimes. Where it's stop saying you're a shitty filmmaker, dude, because I'm trying to defend you as a cinematic master and, part of the legacy of 90s independent genius, and whenever time you say you're a shitty filmmaker, it gives anybody who doesn't like you, that I'm arguing with, ammunition. I took debate in high school. I was almost a lawyer. I can't help it. I think this way. If I was going to go anti-Kevin Smith, I was going to ever do devil's advocate and say Kevin Smith sucks, I would constantly be quoting the fact that you always say you're a bad filmmaker. Stop doing that. You are a fantastic filmmaker, and to get back on point, you're an excellent writer. All the books you've read, all the books you've read are great, Kevin. All the books you've written are fucking lovely. They're wonderful reads, and they are real books, man. You wrote them. They're your stories. The diary, okay, sort of, I understand what you're saying there, but still, you did write that. You committed to writing a diary for over a year. And the things you do in that diary, which we'll get to eventually, are some of the best things you've ever done. As I've said many times by now, the Me and My Shadow series in that diary is some of the fucking best stuff you've ever done. You could have just written that and released it as like a very thin, 50-page, however long that story ended up being. You could have just released that. I think the critics would have fucking been blowing you from now until the cows come home. So you are a writer, you are a real author, they are real books, and you're a fantastic filmmaker. So stop saying you're a shitty one, because it drives me nuts. I don't have to defend you against you. It's bad enough I have to defend you against everybody else who thinks, who says mean shit about you, like my mom. Actually, my mom likes you just fine. She just thinks you're silly. Which, let's face it, you are. So am I. Anyway, I'm way off topic here. Sincerely, George, thank you guys for watching, and I'm in a good mood. I fucking may have a job that's not Circle K. So I'll be back tomorrow to talk about An Evening with Kevin Smith, I believe is what I'm going to talk about next. Because again, we're not the Jersey Girl yet, and I'm trying to go in order. So he did a few things before getting to Jersey Girl, and one of those things was the very first Evening with Kevin Smith. So I'll see you next time for that. And I'm going to eat some pizza and watch Kenny vs. Spenny. Long day. Later.